Muy buenas tardes, tengan todas y todos ustedes bienvenidos a este webinario. Mi nombre es Gaspar Rivera Salgado, soy el director del Centro para Estudios Mexicanos. Welcome everyone. Good evening. My name is Gaspar Rivera Salgado. I'm the director of the Center for Mexican Studies at UCLA, and welcome to this webinar. This is part of a series of webinars we've been having this quarter. Um, and the title of the series is called The Challenges Facing Mexico's Next President. Since this is one of those years where both Mexico and the United States have presidential elections on the same year. So we're monitoring the development of the presidential elections, and we're very happy to have with us today my dearest colleague, Patricia Ham Escamilla, based in Mexico City. But before I introduce her properly, let me do our UCLA land acknowledgement. The Center for Mexican Studies at UCLA acknowledges our presence on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Gabrielino Tonga people. If you are watching us on the Zoom, make sure that you use the Q question and answer button if you want to pose a question, and then I will facilitate that. We'll read the questions to our panelists, Patricia. So let me introduce you to our panelists today, Dr. Patricia Escamilla Ham, who will do a presentation titled Mexico and U.S. Cooperation to Counter Drug Trafficking Organizations, Challenges and Opportunities. Dr. Escamilla Ham is Emeritus Associate Professor of the National Security Affairs at the William J. Perry Center for Hemispheric Defense Studies based at the National Defense University in Washington, D.C. She's now based in Mexico City, where she's following very closely the development of these presidential elections, but also Dr. Escamilla Ham is astute observer of politics in Mexico. And we're going to have an insider's look from Mexico. How's this debate about policies facing the challenges posing the next president looks like from Mexico City? Dr. Patricia Escamilla Ham, welcome, and thank you for being here with us. So the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Rivera. It is a pleasure to be at UCLA, where, just to add a quick note, I am a Bruin too. I got my master's in Latin American Studies at UCLA, and it was a wonderful experience. So, well, I like to begin by telling you about the special moment that where we are today in Mexico and the United States. As some of you know, it only happens once every 12 years that Mexico and the United States have elections at the same time. This year, in June, Mexico will elect a new presidential candidate. And in November, the United States will elect a new presidential person. So let me tell you briefly about Claudia Sheinbaum, who is one of the presidential candidates in Mexico, and Xochitl Gálvez, who is the other presidential candidate. Xochitl Gálvez is a conservative or rightist woman. She is a businesswoman and became a politician too. She has a degree in computer engineering and held elected office for mayor of a borough in Mexico City. She also was a member of the cabinet at the Fox administration between 2000 and 2006. And then she became a Mexico senator, a position that she put on hold to run as candidate. She's the candidate of a coalition of three parties. One is the PRI, the other one is the PAN, and the other one is the PRD. Most commonly known is the PRI, which is the party that led an authoritarian regime for nearly 80 years in Mexico and lost office for the first time in 2000. Then the PAN is the Conservative Party that held presidential office twice from 2006 to 2012, and then later, and then earlier from 2000 and 2006. So Xochitl Galvez is the daughter of a father who owned a restaurant in a small town in Mexico, and her mother is a housewife. Claudia Sheinbaum is a similar but different kind of politician and woman. She is the first Jewish woman who has held office in Mexico. First, as a mayor of a borough in Mexico City. And if she wins the presidential election, she will be the first woman who is a Jewish person. So that is an interesting aspect of her personality. But she is a scientist and an academic by profession. She holds a degree in energy engineering, and she's an expert in climate change and sustainable development. Actually, she took courses at UC Berkeley, so she is in a way a part of the UC system in California. Claudia also was a member of a team that conducted a research project on climate change and won the Nobel Prize in 2015. So they're both very accomplished women, and they represent opposite sides that right now in Mexico City are actually holding a very controversial and very fierce electoral campaign. So let's see what challenges are they going to face. That's one of the main issues for U.S.-Mexico relations experts, but for all Latin American and Mexicanists. So let's see. Mexico and the U.S. have a very complex agenda. Many different issues, but they are all of an interesting kind. They are what is called interdomestic. In other words, they may be domestic issues, but they have international implications, or vice versa. They are international issues that have domestic implications. And I'm not going to get into other possibilities, but mostly these are the issues that are going to be faced by the new presidents of the United States and Mexico. As you know, candidate Joe Biden is the incumbent president in the United States, and Donald Trump is former president of the United States. So they are both familiar with the relationship and the agenda. So it will be the next Mexican president that will actually find herself in a situation where they have to deal with this agenda that is practically new for them. So let me tell you quickly that the border, well, the agenda has many different kinds of issues, but one that is particularly very important, and it's an issue that has to do with drug trafficking and security issues. The US-Mexico border is a huge border. It's about 2,000 miles long from the Pacific coast to the Atlantic Ocean. And it's a very porous border, despite the many different walls, fences that have been in place for many years. They're not new, they have been there for several decades. So important about the border is that it has this security significance, because it is a border that has is a particularly security importance for the US, because it's the point of entry to the south of the United States, where the assumption is that any potential threat could try to come into the United States through this border. But let me just tell you that illicit flows and licit flows enter from both ways, north to south and south to north. One particularly aspect that we must keep in mind when we talk about drug trafficking is that the border is known for having a special infrastructure that is designed to facilitate legal flows like trade, like business crossers, but it's also designed to impede illicit flows like arms going from north to south, like drugs coming from the south, and other illicit flows. So as you can imagine, it's not easy to achieve both objectives at the same time. And that's why authorities in both countries spend a lot of time discussing and collaborating on issues of related to the border. The border for the United States has this very strategic significance, because the way Americans see it, not Mexicans, not other countries in the continent see it, is that for the US, the US-Mexico border is the beginning of a security corridor that goes all the way to Central America, Colombia. And it's not highlighted here properly, but as you can see, this security corridor also includes routes through Miami, which in the 1970s used to be the drug capital of the world, and also other entry points into the United States from the Atlantic, including the East Coast area. So the border is a big issue, but there are other issues too. Trade. Trade is super important in US-Mexico relations. And even though it's not a security issue in the sense that we understand security, it is very important and plays a role, because oftentimes when there are frictions between US and Mexico, as it will happen during the Trump administration, trade could be used as leverage to force certain behaviors on the other country. Trade is at a point that is very, in a very optimistic situation, especially for Mexico. Mexico is now the first trade partner of the United States. It sells products to Mexico more than Canada and more than China. So that is an advantage. However, it could also be a source of contention when a president like Trump did uses trade sanctions on trade to pressure Mexico to act upon certain other issues. So trade is very important. And most remarkable is that it symbolizes the interdependency between the two countries. In other words, Mexico and the United States are not independent from each other. They depend on each other for all of these issues that you see here on the screen, because they cannot deal with one of the issues without the collaboration, without cooperation from the other. So it's very important. So let's move to drug trafficking and related issues. Here we can see that drug trafficking has implications. It involves use of drugs, abuse of drugs, addictions, and as all of you know, also deaths from overdoses of illicit drugs, particularly fentanyl. But on the other hand, related to drug trafficking is the trafficking of firearms. Most of the firearms that Mexican drug traffickers use come from the United States. And firearms provoke deaths. So these are two issues that are very interrelated, and both cause harm to the people in each country. So what are the big issues that right now are likely to face the new presidents in Mexico? The United States has a huge problem of drug overdose deaths. About 70% are caused by the taking fentanyl, this super lethal drug that is between 50 to 100% stronger, more potent than morphine. As you can see in this screen, the number of deaths caused by overdoses just skyrocketed in the United States around 2014. But really, governments did not start paying close attention until a few years later. So the crisis began to evolve and get worse and worse. So as of 2021, about 107,000 people have died from overdoses. An estimate, which is not very accurate, is that as of now, there have been about 128,000 deaths. But particularly, I want you to notice that there is indeed a big problem of substance use disorders in the United States. And unfortunately, they have not been addressed properly. There's very little attention to what can be done for that. So that's a huge problem for the next presidents. But Mexican presidents also face this big problem. And it's different. It's related to drug trafficking, and it involves deaths, but not caused by drug use. In this case, Mexico faced a situation where the number of homicides was declining it declined for several decades, and it had reached, very acceptable levels for a country like Mexico, and then it started skyrocketing immediately. In 2007, the number of homicides almost doubled. And then the trend continued increasing. There was a temporary stability, but then it began to increase again. So the number of deaths today altogether are about 450,000, more than 450,000, according to these recorded numbers. the latest figures are that the curve began to decline. And according to this graphic, we see that there has been a decline of about 17% as of August last year, I think. And but the latest is about 20% decline. So it is not that meaningful in terms of the big figure, but it is an optimistic sign. The question is whether or not Mexican government will continue to support that declining trend. And that's going to be the job of the next president. So let's wonder why, how this happened, how did Mexico and the US got into this situation that has reached critical circumstances. So some of you know, some of you don't know because you're too young, but the United States started a war on drugs over 50 years ago. And it has maintained the same logic, the same strategic principles, even though the evidence says that it's not working, that it has failed. The main features of this drug war were decided by politics, not based evidence science. The experts were not really taken into consideration to decide that the war on drugs was going to be fought as it has. So the main feature, the main characteristic of this war is that there was a decision to emphasize put attention on the supply side of the drug problem. And that is, it will address the external and internal supply. That is, the supply in the United States and the supply in coming from other countries. The demand side, which is the one that considers the use and abuse of drugs, was minimized. And the way that we can see the attention that was paid to one or the other is by looking at congressional budgets. The congressional budget approved to fight the supply side was always higher than the demand side. And there are basically two more features that we need to know about this strategy to fight the war inside the United States and outside. One is that law enforcement and interdiction were the main objectives to achieve. So there were, it has been arrest of both users and sellers, retailers, suppliers, wholesalers. So, and the other one is interdictions and seizures of drugs. So this is in the United States, but the thing is that the United States did not stay fighting the drug war just domestically inside US territory. It decided that they have to go abroad to fight the supply of drugs that came from outside. So one of the main parts of this US drug war is to pressure countries like Mexico and Colombia to fight the drug war, to help reduce the drug problem in the United States. So in 2007, the Mexican president, Felipe Calderón, signed a security assistance agreement with President George W. Bush, and who was later followed by President Obama and President Trump and President Biden. So they, the main feature of this agreement was to engage in a joint effort to fight drug trafficking organizations. And they created a assistance program that is known as the Merida Initiative. In 2007, the Merida Initiative was signed, and it lasted until 2021. Remember, I told you earlier that very soon after the drug war in Mexico was started, it became obvious that it was a failure. But nonetheless, the Merida Initiative lasted until 2021. So what are the main features of the Merida Initiative? First of all, it is an assistance program in kind to help Mexican security forces to be prepared to fight drug trafficking organizations, and also to help Mexico strengthen its police and judicial institutions to be able to fight and deal with these organizations. So the key features of the Merida Initiative, which actually became the framework of to work with, where is to dismantle the drug trafficking organizations. They use what they call a kingpin strategy, which meant that they were going to focus on arresting and prosecuting and killing whenever it happened the bosses of the organization, the kingpins. And they made lists of the most wanted, 100 to 100 most wanted kingpins of each organization. They also focused on the use of military force. In other words, they use a hardline to this effect. They actually train and professionalize police forces. And they also contributed to reforming the trial system in Mexico. So what happened as a result of these wars in the United States? Well, actually, it wasn't very good. The results that I said that became evident very soon in 2007 are so evident that it's hard to understand why they continue with the same strategy for so many years. 50 years in the US and about 15 years in Mexico. What happened is what we call the Hydra effect. If you see this little animal here, this little monster that has several heads, it symbolizes the results of this US-Mexico war. And the little game, I don't know if you as kids played it or you have played it with your kids. I have with my kids. It's called the whack-a-mole game. So that's how we can actually explain the results. In other words, the kingpin strategy, which was supposed to dismantle the organizations, get rid of the kingpins, and then eliminate the organizations. That was the logic. They were going to be easier to dismantle because they were going to have no bosses, right? No, what happened is that They killed one, and then 3 or 4 came up to replace the one leader. Why? Well, because the business of drug trafficking is so lucrative, so attractive, that there's always someone who wants to run the business. So new people took over, more organizations emerged, and very soon, Mexico, instead of having 7 criminal organizations as in the beginning, had about 400. And not only it had so many criminal organizations, but it also had very powerful organizations, which did not exist at the beginning of this war. The organizations multiplied, as I said. They also became more powerful because they began to import arms from the United States. So they became like armies. They had all sorts of, let me tell you what kinds of arms they began to have. So they were empowered. They had arms like AR-15s, you know. AR-15s are very, very powerful military type assault weapons. They had machine guns, Browning 50 caliber. The 50 caliber is known as police killers because they perforate the vest, you know, that protect the shield, the people. They actually also perforate vehicles that have been protected. They had RPG-7 anti-tank rocket-propelled grenade launchers. These are huge. These are army-type weapons. In fact, in 2020, the then Secretary of Public Security in Mexico City, who actually worked for Claudia Sheinbaum. He was part of her security cabinet. His vehicle was attacked by a one of these anti-tank rocket propelled grenade launchers. And in 2015, a military helicopter, for the first time, was shot down by one of these weapons. So that gives you an idea what kind of criminals Mexico and the US are dealing with. Mexico in particular, because it is in its territory that this is happening, right? This war is taking place. So, the organizations multiplied, became stronger, had more capacity to operate and to traffic drugs into not only the United States, but whenever. The whack-a-mole game, it's a metaphor that I like to use because if you know how it plays, you whack a mole and then another pops up. You whack that other one and another pops up. And it's like a never-ending game. And this is how I see, how I can explain this strategy failed strategy to fight the drug trafficking organizations. Keep in mind that drug trafficking organizations could be construed as business organizations. Their main objective is profit, to make money. And while there is a market in the US, a demand market, there will always be these DTOs or any other DTOs willing, eager to supply that market. So it is the never-ending game or as a vicious circle. But I have a picture here of Genaro Garcia Luna, who is with Hillary Clinton when she was a campaign candidate. It is important to identify Genaro Garcia Luna for those of you who don't know who he is. Genaro Garcia Luna was the top partner from Mexico with the United States. He was the person who implemented the Merida security strategy and program in Mexico. So he was huge. He had a huge role in this Mexican drug war. And it is important to signal him because he lasted from 2006 to 2012. And then he went off to Miami, set up a consulting firm where he kept advising Mexico and other countries on security issues and selling services and equipment too. Well, guess what? He is the one who designed the reforms in the police, for example, and other security agencies. Well, in December 2019, Genaro Garcia Luna was arrested by the United States in Miami. He was jailed, and eventually in 2023, he was convicted of colluding with the Cartel de Sinaloa Cartel, one of the two most powerful drug trafficking organizations in US-Mexico drug trafficking dynamics. So he was captured for conspiring to traffic drugs and for receiving money from drug trafficking organizations. So the question that rises here is, did he actually do a true job in reforming the police, or did he actually design a system that would actually work to benefit the drug trafficking organizations? That is a premise that actually was very important in 2019 when the president in office, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, decided that the federal police was so corrupt and so inefficient to fight crime in Mexico that it had to be dismantled. So President López Obrador, known as AMLO, dismantled the federal police created by Genaro Garcia Luna and created a new force that we may talk about it soon. But basically, we can see that during this period, drug use did not stop. Drug trafficking did not become became reduced during this time. Drug trafficking organizations stayed very powerful, especially the Cartel de Sinaloa, and a new one that emerged during this time, which is called the Cartel Jalisco Nueva Generación, Jalisco New Generation Cartel. So those are the two cartels or drug trafficking organizations that the Drug Enforcement Administration and the US government see as their main targets in the fight against fentanyl and the overdose crisis. So, oops, something happened here. Let's see. Okay. So let me tell you just quickly, one of the reasons why, besides being very powerful and having all the money in the world to actually succeed in their operations, is that the drug trafficking organizations are very flexible. They adjust very easily. They're not like governments, that they have to go through a whole process, including congressional approval to change policies. No, drug trafficking organizations are very flexible, very resilient, as I said, and they change routes, they change practices very quickly. So here I want to show you this. It's a submarine built by drug trafficking by the Cartel de Sinaloa, and this one was detected in Mexico by the Mexican government. But I saw another submarine like this, and I actually went in Colombia. It was a sample of the power of the Colombian cartels. And also, I want to pay attention to this picture on my right-hand side. And it's a picture of tunnels. Tunnels that were built by criminal organizations to avoid border controls. So they decided, well, they're getting, a little fuzzy at the border and more, strict in their monitoring and searching. So let's just go under. So they built tunnels to cross from one side to another. And they actually engage in drug trafficking from the north to the south, and from south to north, and from north to south, they just brought weapons and whatever other things they had to smuggle. So they're very clever. They have lots of money. The U.S. Drug market is the most lucrative in the world. It's worth about $150 billion. That was a figure estimated in 2016, and there's not any new figure to update it, but $150 billion a year. So imagine how many people are really eager to get their money into that, their hands into that money. So they can pay for whatever they want. They can pay for scientists to tell them how to do things, engineers to build submarines or tunnels or whatever. On the other side in the screen, I have a picture of a little bag of Skittles, the candy, and also coconuts that inside have bags of fentanyl powder. I think it's powder. Could be tablets too. But anyway, so these are different forms of trying to smuggle the countries, the drugs to the other side of the border. Just one of many, many ways. Let me just add here that the Mexican drug traffickers deliver the drugs to the border, and then they are crossed to the other side already by US citizens. And from there, I'm going to show you a map in a minute. They are delivered to the distributors, the wholesalers, who in turn give them to the retailers. All of this is in the US, and it involves American drug trafficking organizations, usually known as gangs. So in 2018, a new Mexican president came to office. I mentioned him, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, known as AMLO. So he came with new different ideas, but he was, his counterpart at the time was Donald Trump. So AMLO's new ideas were not very, very influential with the Trump administration. But in 2021, Joe Biden came to office, and they coincided in their ideas about how to deal with the drug issue. Their ideas were actually contrasted with the ones set up previously under the Merida Initiative and the US drug war. So they actually agreed in one thing. Our main objective has to be reducing the harm that drug use and drug trafficking is causing to our people in both countries, okay? So they decided that, well, the drug demand in the US has to be reduced. And arms trafficking from north to south has to be reduced. And the drug use issue should be treated as a public health issue, not a security issue. So those were the main significant changes in their strategic thinking. They also decided that they were going to address this drug trafficking organizations and structure with intelligence, by emphasizing intelligence and investigation instead of the use of force. So they were going to try to still capture kingpins, still process kingpins, still try to eliminate the drug supply as much as they could, but instead of with force, with intelligence and investigation. And they were going to cooperate for that. So basically, they also agreed in that they have to deal with the problem at the roots. In other words, reduce drug use, why people are using drugs in the United States and in Mexico, how, why people join the delinquent organizations. So they have met frequently. They have been met about 3 times since the first time to discuss security, this cooperation and security issues, but most importantly, how to deal with it. And they have, you know, engaged in interdiction in actually in Mexico, the sizing, the interdiction of fentanyl increase skyrocketed since 2020 and has been, you know, successful in a way in which, in the way that they have actually interdicted the product, the drug. However, they have not been successful in that interdiction actually works to reduce the drug supply and the drug use. Let me show you quickly one of the slides. One of the activities is to destroy the labs that are used to produce synthetic drugs. Fentanyl is a synthetic drugs made out of chemical precursors that are synthesized and turned into powder and then into like tablets or pills. Sometimes it's sold in liquid. But look at this. You see where those that man is stirring some liquid, and then you see other big pots there. And on the other on top, you also see a little room with just you know, very, very modest furniture. Well, that's a lab. And that's what they're after destroying. When you hear some critics say, oh, labs have to be destroyed with drones, military, you know, weaponized drones. Well, I think that they have in mind that it's like a lab, like a Pfizer, like a Pfizer drug lab. No, these are little made, you know, very, very modest, very rudimentary labs that can be very easily moved to another site if they are detected or destroyed. So that is what they're after. They're after. It's not a huge technified industry, but it's a very, very rudimentary industry. Let me just quickly show this map. Okay, so we all think that the drugs come from Mexico. That's what the DEA tells us. So we have to focus on fighting the border. Well, the thing is that that is not exactly the case. even though most of the fentanyl comes through the Mexico border, there is an interesting feature of that supply. That supply is made of fentanyl that is very impure. It only has about 10 or 5% of fentanyl. The rest are just additives. So it doesn't yield much fentanyl to be sold once it's across the border. However, there is fentanyl coming from China and from India, for example, that is going through the Pacific Ocean, very often by mail or by messenger service, Federal Express, for example, that comes to Mexico, the United States, and Canada, for example. And they sell fentanyl, chemical precursors to make fentanyl, but also tablets and powder. So that powder is 95% pure. So if you get a kilo into the United States in a little package by Federal Express, it's going to yield much more retail product than the one comes from Mexico. So we have to understand that it's a very complex supply chain that involves not only Mexico, but China, India, the United States, Canada. And the fentanyl comes from Canada too. So what are the issues that, oops, hang on. So this is what the next president in Mexico will have to deal with when she comes to office on October 1st, well, in the fall, October or September, I can't remember. October 1st, I'm sorry. So the polls prognosticate or can give us an idea of who the likely presidential winner will be. And that will be President Claudia Sheinbaum. Dr. Sheinbaum has about 65% of approval compared to Xochitl Galvez, who has 29% approval. And I'm using data from a pollster that is called Oraculus, which makes a poll of polls. So this is very updated, and it combines the results from many different polls. So the most likely presidential figure in 2024 will be Claudia Sheinbaum. I cannot tell you about Joe Biden and Trump, you know, and I don't want to speak ill of either one of them. So I'm just assuming that either one could be president of the United States next in November, well, in January of 2025, actually. So what are going to be some of the main challenges? Let me tell you about one challenge. It's huge for Mexico, and it's permanent. It doesn't change with the situation, at least not most of the time. Some of you may have heard this saying, poor Mexico, so far from God and so close to the United States. You get the meaning that it actually means that, well, you know, it's disgrace to be close to the US for Mexico. But President AMLO actually changed it. He began to say, no, it's not right. We should say, poor Mexico, so close, so far from God, no, so close to God, and not so far from the United States. In other words, he wanted to make it look like it's not really so bad. You know, there are good things about being close to the US, but nonetheless, there are bad things. One of them is this power asymmetry between the US and Mexico. Mexico is always the vulnerable partner vis-a-vis the US. The US is always the most powerful partner, neighbor of Mexico. And that makes it difficult for Mexico, for the future president, to have a wide margin of action. Okay, the US will continue to have the upper hand on security issues. However, let me just point out that because they are interdependent countries, they depend on each other for many issues. And in some issues, Mexico sometimes has a better position. So that occasionally provides some leverage for Mexico, but it's not something that is can be predicted all the time. A second challenge, and that's that Claudia, if she becomes president, will face, is that even though they coincide, at least for now, the two governments in what their priorities are not exactly the same. Okay, they coincide in that they want to avoid the harm to the people. That's their main concern. Okay, but more specifically, Mexico's concern about related to criminal organizations is a reduction of homicides, is pacification. Whereas for the US, the priority is to reduce fentanyl overdoses deaths. So they're related, they intersect, but they're not exactly the same. And that could be challenging for the next president to address and cooperate. I said that that most of the time their relationship is limited by this power asymmetry. And there are experts who say that for Mexico, it doesn't matter who wins, the Republicans or the Democrats. However, I think there is a caveat in the case of Trump. Okay, if Trump becomes president, his personality and his ideological and threatening rhetoric would actually bring more tensions to the relationship. I'm not sure if he'll get into that, but keep in mind that Claudia is a woman and she is Jewish. So we have heard some comments about that not being very welcome on the Trump and Republican ultra-rightist camp. So the issue here is that the risk of sanctions to coerce Mexico into collaborating would increase with Trump in office. He has already once threatened President López Obrador governments with sanctions unless he cooperated with the US policy of contention of immigration. So that is always going to be a risk in the next presidency. An opportunity. Sheinbaum and Biden converge on several important premises. First of all, they support the bicentennial understanding signed in 2021 with the incumbent Mexican government. They share the priority. I have actually talked to people close to Claudia, and she's very concerned, very committed to reduce the number of homicides and about drug use too. They also coincide in that they have to deal with the roots of the problem and the use of intelligence. Claudia just gave a speech a few days ago, and she emphasized the importance of intelligence and investigation as opposed to the use of force to deal with criminal activity. So they coincide in many issues. So if Biden is the US next president, then we'll have that coincidence of that convergence of interests. And also an opportunity in terms of addressing cooperation to improve security issues and deal with drug criminality and so forth, is that actually Sheinbaum was very successful when she was the head of Mexico City, which is equivalent to a state governor. She was very successful in reducing homicides and high impact crimes. So she intends to do the same in Mexico. If she becomes president, she intends to apply similar strategies as that were used in Mexico. She has spoken about strengthening the rule of law by reforming the police, which is crucial in Mexico. Mexico, one of the reasons why it hasn't been more successful in dealing with crime and violence is that Mexico has very weak police, local and state police agencies, very, very weak, and they have problems of corruption. So she wants to actually get into that. So I think I'm going to end with that just by adding one more point, is that the domestic situation in Mexico is very difficult right now, and that might restrict Sheinbaum's margin of action in terms of collaboration with the US and actions domestically. As you know, the levels of homicides are very high, and that's a huge problem. And there is this weak rule of law. I just mentioned the institutions, the police institutions at the state and in municipal level are very weak. But also, it is very likely that Claudia faced powerful political opponents who have, since 2018, have pursued a strategy to oppose everything that President AMLO and her successor is likely to support. So that will mean that she will be at risk of some of her actions being boycotted or sabotaged by the opposition. So anyways, so let me just to conclude. So the US drug policy must change. There's no question about it if they want to actually achieve some of the stated objectives, which means reduce drug use and overdose deaths and reduce violence in Mexico. So the demand side must be prioritized. But we know that if Biden continues as president, well, his hands will be tied. Congress controls much of the decision-making regarding changes to drug policy. Unless this is drug policy changes, the drug use is going to continue being the magnet because it's so high, it's so lucrative for drug traffickers that there's very unlikely that there's a reduction in the supply. And well, just to reiterate, the use of force has not worked and is unlikely to work in the future because of all these, the Hydra, the whack-a-mole effects. They impede progress against the drug traffickers. And well, it's not very optimistic attitude on my side to end with this assertion, but I think that's the way it is. And most experts, or all experts, I should say, agree with me in that drug policy must change, or else we're going to continue on the same path. And with this, I leave you and give a chance for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. Great. Thank you. If you don't mind to end your presentation so we can go to the main screen.
Yep. Let's see. Oh, here. Okay.
Thank you. And I invite all of the participants to please use the question and answer feature in the webinar so you can pose your questions. And we have about 10 minutes for questions. And there's a question from Jose Luis Figueroa, who is asking, if Xochitl Galvez overcomes the gap in the polls and becomes elected president, what do you think her policy will be in terms of dealing with organized crime?
I was afraid you were going to ask me that. I have thought a lot about it. Let me just tell you, she hasn't made any explicit and public presentations regarding what her policies would be. But she just visited Washington, D.C. and New York City recently. So her visit and some of her statements over there give you an idea, okay? So she doesn't seem to try to change anything. She didn't talk about drug trafficking, by the way, but she talked about immigration policy. First of all, she went to the US. That means that she's looking for the okay from American key actors in the relationship, including the government officials, congressional members, and think tanks, and businessmen and investors. And she just said that she would be a better partner with the US. Basically, that's what the way she put it. So what I think it means is that she might just continue as it is right now. That's what I can tell you. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. And there's a question from our colleague, Marcela Meneses, who's asking if you know the security policies of the two candidates to the presidency. What do you think about their approach to
the candidates on the Mexican side?
Yes, in Mexico, of the two candidates in Mexico.
I don't know the policy proposals of Xochitl Galvez. She hasn't said anything about it. Okay, so I'm just kind of trying to identify what her policies, what her policy preferences will be based on what she did and what she said during her visit to the United States about 2 weeks ago. So I don't know what she proposes. She hasn't really specified publicly, at least. I know what Claudia Sheinbaum has publicly stated, and based on what I know about her preferences, and she actually said something very clearly a few days ago. She actually made a statement about trying to foster, to promote more intelligence and investigation, the use of intelligence and investigation to deal with security issues. Her her policy preferences also are reflected in her statements about the rejection of the use of force as a main tool to deal with crime and to promote development in social programs to deal with delinquency, to reduce delinquency. And she actually, as a mayor of, as a governor of Mexico City, she established many centers, Pilares, which have the objective of attracting the kids, the teenagers, to activities that are that move them away from crime and delinquency. So that's basically it. Also, let me just say quickly that Claudia Sheinbaum has in her, a potential member of her security cabinet will be Omar Garcia Harfuch, who was the Secretary of Public Security during her government of Mexico City. And he is believed to have been the architect of the strategy to very successful strategy to reduce crime and violence in Mexico City.
Thank you, Patricia. And Meisha Liu asked for your email, so I'm going to post it since you had it in the last slide. I posted it in the chat. And she's asking, you mentioned that Andres Manuel López Obrador dismantling the local and state police. Can you talk about the National Guard and its success or challenges that they're facing? And we will close with a second question, if you don't mind, if I can pose it. Oh,
yes.
Go ahead, Patricia.
You want to pose a question? The second question, maybe I can address them both.
Okay. The next question is from Nayeli Almaguer, and she's mentioning that although the nation's challenges are often acknowledged, I hear a lot about positive changes, progress in security, and especially about how infrastructure and development projects are improving security. I'm wondering about how effective these programs are at combating the cause of delinquency.
Let me just, I'm not sure I understood well the last question, but she wonders, or he wonders, if social programs that have been established have had good results. Is that?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I started in the middle of the question just to save time, but the first part says, thank you for sharing your knowledge of the challenges regarding these issues. I have been following the reforms of the Mexican government through the daily press conference given by the president. Although the nation's challenges are often acknowledged, I hear a lot about positive changes, progress in security, especially about how infrastructure and development projects are improving security. I'm wondering about how effective these programs are at combating the cause of delinquency.
Okay, thank you. Well, the first question, let me just clarify. I might have been misunderstood. The AMLO government reformed the federal police, okay? And not necessarily, particularly the state and municipal police forces. Let me tell you. So, on the basis of, the assumption was that the federal police was corrupt, and needless to say, it was ineffective. So President AMLO dismantled the federal police. In its place, the government created a new sort of federal police, and that is the National Guard, which is a force, intermediate force, because it has military and civilian elements. Okay, it has been very controversial because critics claim that it is a military force because it is actually under the jurisdiction of the Secretaría de Defensa Nacional, the National Defense Secretariat. So the Guardia Nacional was better, in the sense that it was a very large force, which is what Mexico, given its population size, needs. There is about 130,000 elements today. The federal police only reached about 38,000, including non-active members. So it was very small. They were never able to recruit more forces. So the Guardia Nacional is still a force in the process of consolidating. It is not yet consolidated. It was created in mid-2019, and it still cannot do the job that it's required to do. So it has been reinforced by keeping the military still in office, as it has been since 2007. I can talk to you about the National Guard more if you want. I wrote an article on it a few years ago, or I'll give you the link to that article. But let me move quickly to programs to reduce delinquency, drug use, and so forth. So that is one of the pillars of the AMLO administration, that to solve some of these problems, drug use, immigration too, they have to address the root causes. And for that, instead of using force, they have to use social programs. And he has actually implemented several programs. One is for young people who are not working and who are not studying because of many impediments. But they give them some like internships, paid internships, to prepare them for the job, the workforce. And they actually, some of them stay in their place where they have the internship. It is very important to measure the impact of this program, for example, and other programs that there are. It hasn't been done. So some of us, some of you may do your dissertation, your thesis on that, because they are supposed to be successful because many young people join. The thing to measure the impact, we would have to see if they actually stay out of trouble, okay? So they join, they go to work, and that's it. They don't consider criminality as an option. So that has to be a chronological study that follows these kids and see if they actually refuse to be recruited as for drug trafficking organizations. So far, I don't know of any study that has done that, but actually it has been, there is a Mexican researcher in Austria who conducted a study that suggests that the best way of reducing or weakening the drug trafficking organizations is by reducing their ability to recruit members. So in theory, and they actually suggest social programs for that. So the idea is that it seems like it makes sense what the AMLO government is doing, and what Claudia has expressed an intent to continue doing it, but it has to be, the impact has to be measured more precisely. If the programs are the kinds of programs that are needed, if they work, if they are reaching the the correct target population and so forth. But it's a very good question because it needs to be addressed.